Today we once again travel back to Japan, but this time to discuss the Izanagi and the Izanami, the primordial gods of Japanese mythology and Shinto religion. They were the brother and sister deities that many believe to have created the islands of Japan, along with many of the Shinto gods and kami. Their names were thought to mean he who invites and she who invites, and it's believed that they were the eighth and last pair of brother and sister deities to be born before the world was formed. When the heavens and the earth were separated out of chaos, the brothers and sisters appeared standing on a floating bridge or platform, where the eldest generation of kami assigned Izanagi and Izanami to bring order and structure to the world, but in order to help them do so, they were given a jeweled spear named Amano Nobuko. Standing atop of their heavenly bridge, they stirred the oceans with the tip of their spear, and each time they lifted their spear, the droplets that fell would form an island. The first of these islands was the Onogoro-shima, and this would be the island they made their home. When they had established themselves on the island of Onogoro, they decided it was time to start a family, and here's where the story gets a tad weird. The marriage ceremony itself involves circling around a sacred pillar, with both gods moving in opposite directions and saying what would equate to a modern day I do. But it was the Izanami who spoke first during this ceremony, which was considered incorrect at a time when women taking initiative in Japan was frowned upon. As a consequence to the Izanagi not speaking first during the wedding ceremony, when his wife eventually gave birth to their first child, that child was horribly misshapen with no bones in his body, which led to him being referred to as the leech child. Unfortunately, that child was placed on a boat and abandoned to float away. This child was known as Hiruko, and he would become a patron of fishermen and one of the 7 deities associated with good fortune. Their second attempt at having a child was just as unsuccessful as their first, and when they eventually consulted with the elder kami, they decided that their marriage ceremony would have to be performed once again. The second attempt at the marriage ceremony was performed correctly, and Izanami gave birth to hundreds of kami and many of the principal islands located in Japan. Giving birth to so many deities eventually took its toll on Izanami. She gave birth to the kami of the seas, the mountains, the wind, and the trees. The earth itself began to take shape, but when she eventually gave birth to Kakatutsi, the kami of fire, she was badly burnt. Many more deities would be born from her tears as she cried out in pain, but the injuries she sustained were too severe, and she would eventually die. Following the death of his wife, Izanagi took it upon himself to avenge Izanami. He took his sword, and he cut Kakatutsi into pieces. From each piece of the fire deity that fell to the ground, dozens of new kami were born. Without his wife, Izanagi was lost, and he attempted to journey to the underworld to retrieve her. But when he arrived, he saw that she had already eaten the food of the underworld, making it so that she was forbidden to ever return to the land of the living. This is somewhat similar to what we see in Greek mythology, with Hades giving Persephone the pomegranate to ensure that she had to return to the underworld. Izanagi was told that his wife would be allowed to return, as long as he promised to be patient, and not lay his eyes upon her again until she was ready. This process was extremely long, and Izanagi's patience grew thin, until he could wait no longer. He attempted to visit his wife once again, but this time he was shocked when he laid his eyes upon her, as all he saw was his wife's decomposing body. Naturally, she was displeased that her husband had broken his promise, seeing her in this unflattering state. He would eventually be chased out of the underworld by the 8 thunders, and in order to stop his pursuers, he threw down his stick in their path, creating the 2 gods associated with the road, Shimata no Kami and Yashimata Hiki, often referred to as Dosujin, a name given to deities who are thought to protect travellers. This part of the story does resemble another Greek myth, the story of Orpheus, the musician who was told that he could return his wife from the underworld, as long as he did not look back at her until they reached the land of the living. Much like Izanagi, he was unable to do so, gazing upon his wife and breaking the promise he had made. When Izanagi had finally reached the land of the living, he decided that he would block the entrance of the underworld with an enormous stone. In order to cleanse himself from the darkness and impurities that he had encountered whilst in the underworld, he performed a ritual in a nearby river. It was during this ritual that many of the Shinto gods were born, from the impurities being washed from Izanagi's body. Izanagi and Izanami were amongst the oldest deities in Japanese mythology and Shinto religion, and they were often held accountable for the creation of the world and many of the deities that existed. If you do have any stories or different variations relating to the Izanagi and the Izanami, then feel free to share them with me in the comments below. But as always, I've been your host, Mythology and Fiction Explained.